Hello and assalamu alaikum everyone. This is Kashif Kamran and I welcome you all to this Facebook live session which is about the March 2021 Advanced Audit and Assurance exams, and the basic purpose of this session is Ask the Tutor. Now if you have any queries or any particular question you want to ask prior to your March 2021 exams, which are just a week away, you are more than welcome to ask your queries. Now, the purpose of this session is just to give you some tips and techniques, which I have already put on my AAA Facebook page. But the more important purpose of this session is to guide you on the right answers to your questions, which you must be having at this point in time. So the true purpose of the session is just to take your questions and to reply to those so that you have a clear mindset before the day of the exam, which is on the 1st of March. So first of all, how is the preparation going, everyone? How are you progressing? How are things going? 1 week before the exam, it's a very tough time, and it's a time where you must be having a very high stress level. So what is exactly happening in this last 1 week? How you're preparing? What has been your strategy? You have any questions, you're more than welcome to ask it. Okay, we have the first question, and the first question is coming from Haji Ismail, and he's asking, sir, how to tackle knowledge ideas like benefits of DDR? Do we have to rote learn the bookish knowledge? Exactly, Haji. In the case of the knowledge stuff, which comes a lot in due diligence, like what is the purpose of due diligence, or what is the benefit of due diligence, or what are the advantages of due diligence. In that case, you can just remember some of the key points. Because eventually, in the case of the knowledge, you just need to apply it as it is. There might be a certain help in the case study, which you can utilize. But at the end of the day, if you do a lot of past papers on due diligence, you can just come across some retention of knowledge on the bookish stuff around due diligence. I hope you got your reply, Haji Ismail. Okay, there is another question from Sirhan Javed. Sir, if I've completed all 6 past papers, what should I do now? If you've completed all the recent 6 past papers, Sirhan, that's wonderful, because that's the right preparation for the March 2021 exams, that you have to focus on the 6 recent past papers. So if you have focused on the 6 recent past papers, that's wonderfully good. And I believe in the last 6 days, what you can do else is just go over the examiner reports if you have not yet read them, because again, the examiner reports are very, very important, and you should read the examiner reports before you enter the exam hall. So if you have not done them yet. Okay. There is another question, again from Haji, asking, done with all the exam practice and syllabus areas except other assignments. Okay, so that you need to focus on other assignments in the next few days coming up. Okay, there is another question from Rosemin. She's asking, sir, I want to ask, if we have taken AAA 1 year ago, then we should retake class or self-study. Would be enough. I'm sorry, maybe an irrelevant question. No, it's a relevant question. If you're planning to give the AAA somewhere now in June, and there is a gap of like 1 year, I prefer you take classes again, because again, the classes will give you the right rigor for exams and the right confidence for exams. After a gap of 1 year, and you sit down home and study, would be pretty difficult. And there might be some changes in the marking scheme, and some minor changes in the syllabus as well. So you will be better equipped with the classes. Okay. There is another question coming from Muhammad Yasser. He's asking, sir, please recommend in the last 2 days which specific areas we need to focus on. See, Yasser, in the last 2 days, I would prefer just practice. Just fine tune yourself against the practice. There is no retention in AAA, right? So honestly, because there is no retention, what to do in the last 2 days is a very big question, right? I believe just go over the examiner answers, just read them through, find the right vocabulary, find the right structure of the answer. Again, you're not idealizing the length of the answer. that you're just going over the examiner answer just to build up your language of the audit, and that might really help. Or just going over the marking schemes of the recent papers in the last 2 days might really help you out in the last 2 days specifically. Okay, there is another question from Edev Abdulaziz. He's asking, sir, which type of question of report is likely in this session? That's a big tricky question. But again, I'm not the examiner. But looking at the recent trends, I've just put my tips. Critical appraisal looks important because examiner is focusing a lot on critical appraisal. Also, a question on going concern, because I think the last time we saw a very good question on going concern was in December 18 exams, and since then not. So I've put in my tips on my Facebook page if you've seen that, Edif. Going concern, a critical appraisal question, or a typical question, just like the September 18 question, the September 18 question number uh, 2. Which was the uncorrected misstatements, where the examiner gives you a lot of uncorrected misstatements and then ask you comment on the matters and explain the impact on the financial statement and on the audit report. That sort of a question looks very important for the upcoming exams in March 2021. Okay, there is another question from Isha Agarwal. She's asking, sir, how can we gain confidence to pass this paper? Because everything is theoretical. And whenever I attempt a question, I run over time. See, Isha, running over time is something of a natural phenomena with the AAA paper. Every student run over time in the AAA paper. Idealizing to complete a 90% paper is very good in AAA. If you aim at 90, that's very good. And if not, you have to give every question a reasonable time, which is the stipulated time of each question. For example, one question has 45 minutes. Do maximum in 45 minutes. Don't take 46 minutes and 47 minutes. If you overrun on time in one question, you're calling yourself into trouble. So if you believe one question is going to take 40 minutes, for run on one question, that will be very, very bad. So I think that's how you should be looking at the time management. And obviously, in a AAA paper, there's nothing to learn. It's all about reading a case study, and on the day of exam, finding the relevant information from the case study, involving yourself in the case study is the key to success. Because there is nothing you can learn and go to the exam hall, right? So it's all about what you do in the 3 hours and how you read the case and how you comprehend the case, how you synthesize the case, how you analyze the case, and how you put up your answer in the 3 hours. Any student who perform best in the 3 hours, completing like 85-90% of the paper, will surely pass the AAA paper. But if you get under stress, you run out of time, you complete like 60 to 70% of the paper, you're calling yourself into trouble. Okay, there is another question from Aaron. He's asking, sir, is there a need to practice additional questions other than from the last 6 past papers? See, Aaron, the last 6 past papers are the most important. If you have completed them, then you should go back to like 2017 exams or 2016 exams maximum. I would not expect students to look into past papers beyond 2016, because 2016 should be your stopping point, and 2016 is where you can go maximum. Okay, there is another question from Zamina. She's asking, I feel I know what question is asking, but when I write, it's not what is supposed to be. Zamina, that's too late for this point in time. But again, you have to build in confidence. If you look at the examiner marking scheme, and you reconcile your point you wrote with the examiner, not the examiner answer, right? The examiner marking scheme. And if like 50% of your points you wrote in the answer reconcile with the examiner points, again, I'm saying in the marking scheme, that's very good. So if the examiner is asking for like ethical issues and you believe you wrote self-interest or you wrote advocacy, and examiner also wrote advocacy and self-interest, that's good. But suppose you wrote intimidation and examiner didn't wrote intimidation, nothing to worry about, because if you have justified why it is an intimidation, then that's very good. So I believe practice more in the last 6 days, and definitely you will gain confidence. Okay, there is another question from Chantal Andrews. She's asking, sir, you have said 1.95 minutes per mark. Does that include a 15 minutes, especially in CBE? This is my first CBE, so I'm a bit nervous. Yes, exactly. The 1.95 has been taken into account with the full time you have. That is 3 hours and 15 minutes. So if you look at 3 hours and 15 minutes, that's total 195 minutes. And you divide that by 100. So for every mark, you have 1.95 minutes, which includes the reading and planning time and which includes the writing time. Because I've taken the total time and I've divided that by 100. So that means 1.95 includes the reading time and the writing time. Now, 1/4 of the time is reading and planning, and 3/4 of the time is writing in the overall paper. Okay, there is another question, a long one. This is from Abdul Azim Roni. Assalamu alaikum, sir. Which section should I start in the exam, A or B? See, examiner is very clear on this. Examiner says the student who start with the strongest question first tends to pass the AAA paper. So you can start in any order. You can start with section B, or you can start with section A. But you have to keep the time barriers. If you start with section B, ensure that you know the time barriers of section B and you complete the section B within the time barrier so that you have a good time for section A. So you can start in any order you're comfortable with. No issues with that at all. Okay, there is another question from Jui. She's asking, do we include emphasis of a meta and other meta in the audit report for an unlisted company? Yes, definitely. The emphasis of a meta paragraph and the other meta paragraphs are for the unlisted company. Even the other meta paragraph can also come in the listed company when there is a change of the auditors. So when there is a change of auditor, in the unlisted company or in the listed company, you add the other meta paragraph. And when there is a significant disclosure rightly made by the management, and that significant disclosure is very important to the shareholder, then you emphasize that particular disclosure in the audit report through an emphasis of a meta paragraph. But yes, in the case of a listed company, we do give CAM precedence over the emphasis of a meta paragraph. So I hope you got your answer right. There is another question from Jeevan. He's asking, sir, how to manage the length of question in question number 1 to a manageable chunk. See, Jeevan, you need to know the time zone of question number 1. For example, you need to complete the question number 1 within, like, say, 95 minutes, for example. Now, you need to do the best in 95 minutes. I'm just giving an example, right? So in the 95 minutes, you read and plan, and then you write. Now, again, the principle is 1/4 of the time is on reading and planning, and 3/4 is on writing. The better you read, the better you plan, the better you write. So 1/4 of the time on reading and planning the case study, on annotating the answer, and 3/4 time on executing the answer within the time. Wherever the time gets up, stop writing and move to the next question. Because I've seen students overrunning on question number 1. And if you overrun on question number 1, you're making the biggest disaster. Because if you overrun on one question, particularly the question number 1, in a hope that only the question number 1 will help you pass the AAA paper, that's the biggest mistake perhaps you're doing in the AAA context. Okay, there is another question. I'm trying to take questions from unique students so everyone gets an opportunity because the questions are coming at a rapid flow now. There is another question from Shabaz Ali. He's asking, throughout the world, there are many different time slots for AAA sitting. Is there likely to be 2 different papers? Yes, definitely. There can be. You might get 2 different sets of paper, and we have seen that exactly happening in the last few exam settings as well, particularly since the start of the computer-based exams and particularly since the start of the remote invigilation. So that's quite possible, right? Okay, there is another question from a student. I cannot read the name because it's in a different language, but the question says, sir, do you have your sample answers for September, December 19 question 2 reporting question? I find it a bit hard and the examiner answer is quite long. See, I cannot read your name, but whoever you are, again, I never project from my platform or from my teaching methodologies idealizing the examiner answer. Rather, I'm very against idealizing or replicating the examiner answer. I really believe that you need to write your own answer. You read the requirement, you understand the requirement, and according to the understanding, you write your own answer. Then you go to the examiner marking scheme, not answer. And from the examiner marking scheme, see the points the examiner wrote in the marking scheme. If 50% of the points are in your answer, wonderful. So don't look at the length of the examiner answer. I've said that so many times that it's a tutorial guidance. You cannot just idealize examiner answer, and you cannot just replicate examiner answer, and you cannot just take examiner answer as a guarantee to success. At the end of the day, in the 3 hours in the exam hall, you need to write your own perspective. And if your own perspective has logical arguments, logical judgments, and logical basis, then that's wonderful. Okay, there is another question from Oko. Is there any list of non-audit services permissible for listed companies? Could you please send on that to WhatsApp? Okay, I'll try my best, Oko, to send them on WhatsApp, or if you are on any student WhatsApp group, they might help you out in that case as well. Okay, there is another question on from Eggy. She's asking, can you give a tip on meta questions? Now, whenever the examiner asks you comment on the meta, Eggy, and the question is on evidence, then comment on the meta. Every time you have to remember that if the meta in the case is an accounting meta, then you first need to comment on its materiality. Then you need to comment on its accounting treatment, and then you need to comment on the underlying risk. If you believe the accounting treatment is wrong, then you have to tell what is understated and what is overstated in the financial statement. So normally when you're attempting a question on a meta, and that meta is an accounting meta, so you start with materiality, then you come down to the treatment, and then you speak of the risk, like the under and the overstatement, right? Okay, there is another question from okay, there is another question from Aaron again. Sir, are there any tips focusing on the CB platform which helps us saving time during the exams? Exactly, Aaron. I've covered some computer-based exams uh, tutorial sessions on my YouTube channel if you have watched that, because I think since the computer-based exams have started, even though in Pakistan they will start from June 2021, I have included some guidance sessions on my YouTube channel if you can follow that for the reply to your answer. Okay, there is another question from Muhammad Raza. Sir, practicing last 5 questions only is adequate because of shortage of time? Yes, if you have shortage of time, the recent papers, the recent 5 papers, or the recent 6 papers from September 18 is the best you can do, right? The best you can do. Okay. There is another question coming from Nimisha Agarwal. She is asking, sir, can you please give a list of marking scheme compilation of different questions exam? Nimisha, I've given them on topic wise basis, right? Generally throughout the AAA paper, the marking scheme is 1 mark, right? Per valid point. Now you go with ethical issues, 1 mark per ethical issue. You go with professional issue, 1 mark per professional issue. You go with quality control issues, 1 mark per quality control issue. Examiner asks for actions, 1 mark per action. Examiner asks for procedures, 1 mark per procedure. Examiner asks for evidence in the working paper file, 1 mark per evidence. Examiner asks for sufficiency and appropriateness of evidence, 1 mark per sufficiency and appropriateness of evidence. In the entire reporting questions, everything is worth 1 mark. So most of the AAA paper is on 1 mark. Yes, we know when a question comes on audit risk or when a question comes on business risk, each business risk is worth 2 marks, and each audit risk is worth either 3 marks. If that audit risk involves the materiality, the treatment, and the risk, then that is worth 3 marks. But if that is an audit risk which does not involve materiality, or if that is the audit risk which does not involve the accounting treatment, then that is also worth 2 marks. So generally, it's 1 mark, right? Okay, there is another question. Again, I cannot read the name because it's in a different language, but the question asks for, sir, does data analytics important this time? See, data analytics was published by the examiner in the it's been like a year now. and it was examined for 5 marks in the last exam sitting, which was December 2020. It's knowledge, right? We know data analytics is an emerging issue for the audit industry, and the use of data analytics is an emerging issue. As a student, you should know what are benefits of data analytics to the auditor. See, it's one of the recent articles, though it has been examined for 5 marks. But when you read the recent articles on ACC website, it's one of the recent article. So you should have knowledge. If you speak of the importance, probably not for March 2021 exams. Okay. There is another question from Jui. She's asking, how relevant is this topic, auditor liability, in terms of exam? See, Jui, I've already mentioned auditor liability. There is an article. Examining team has wrote an article on auditor liability. And I think the last time, if I'm not mistaken, we saw a question on auditor liability was way back in June 2013 exams. And since then, we have not saw a question on auditor liability. And that was my reason that this time in March 2021, you can expect the unexpected. So probably examiner might ask you a 5 to 6 marks knowledge on auditor liability, or how does the auditor reduce the liability. So I've already recommended in my tips to read the article auditor liability. And I've given the reference of the question, which came way back in 2013 exams. Okay, there is another question from Haji Ismail. If a company is newly listed, then opening balances can be a relevant risk. Yes, if a company is newly listed, then in that case, not just the opening balances can be a risk. If the company is newly listed, then the application of IAS 33 and the application of IFRS 8 is also at risk. But Haji, if the auditor has not changed, the same auditor has done the audit last year, and the same auditor is doing the audit this year, then even if it's a newly listed company, the opening balances cannot be considered as a relevant risk. So that would be too hypothetical risk. I got you. I hope you got your answer right. Okay. There is another question from Vakar Faiz asking, sir, which are most expected areas in other assignments for this attempt? Vakas, I hope you follow my AAA Facebook page, right? Because it's been like 1 week since I posted my tips and techniques. Again, every time it comes with a disclaimer because I'm not the examiner, and it's just a probability, or it's just an hypothetical assumption which might be wrong. But I believe minus the review of prospective financial information, all the other 3 assignments, which includes forensic, which includes the due diligence, and which includes the audit of performance information. Audit of performance information last came in June 17 exams, question number 3, and since then has not come. So expect the unexpected, right? Okay. Another question from Namisha again. Is there any particular technical article which we should focus on? Namisha, I've given that so many times, right? Over my Facebook page, in my webinars, my March 2021 webinars, particularly the 5 exam techniques article and the group audit article. The group audit article should be must read because it gives you a lot of good knowledge about using the work of a component auditor. So I expect using the work of a component auditor is an important topic and has come in the recent past papers as well. So the tips I've shared, Namisha, I hope you've gone over my tips. If you've gone over the tips, the relevant articles are mentioned there, which you should be focusing on. Okay, there is a question from Wilfred. She's asking, looking at the previous trends, business risk has not been repetitive. Is it safe to say that audit risk is high likely for this exam? Yes. Because business risk came recently. If I'm not mistaken, it was somewhere in the September 2020 exams. So idealizing business risk normally comes after a gap of like 6 months, like 2 exam sittings. So considering we had a very recent business risk question with ROM. So that is the reason I expect either an audit risk question or a ROM question. But again, this is not a guarantee, right? Every time we put the tips, it's very important to understand that the tips is a probability. On the day of the exam, you might even find a business risk question. So you cannot come out of the examination hall and saying, oh, the tutor said it will be an audit risk. You see, you have to complete the 100% syllabus, right? You need to understand the meaning of the word tips. Tips is a probability, right? So, but still, I have a strong confidence on audit risk or ROM question for the upcoming exams. Okay, there is another question from Isra. She's asking, Sir, I haven't practiced the questions. Which approach would be best for me from this point? I've also an AFM exam. Please assist. Oh, you are into a big trouble now. 7 days more, and you're saying you haven't practiced the question, and you're preparing for a AAA exam. I think you've given too much time to AFM, and in that case, you've compromised your AAA. But 7 days, whatever you can do is practice 6 recent paper. Sit down with 6 recent paper. At least do one paper a day and read the examiner report, not the answer. Read the examiner report. One day, one paper, one examiner report. The other day, one paper, one examiner report. 6 days. You will feel far better. Okay. There is a question coming from Edmund. Is it okay to be going through the last 5 exam settings by looking at the examiner answers to see how the examiner explains the various risks, as this will give you a bank of various risk explains? Yes, it is. But see, uh, again, you cannot expect that the same risk will come to your exam setting, or you will write the risk the same way. Yes, what I believe you can gain from examiner answers is vocabulary, the way to answer, the format of answer. But again, don't get distracted with the length of the answer. Don't idealize the length of the answer. If you want to gain something from the examiner answer, vocabulary, number one, format, number two, structure, number three, the way the examiner starts, the way the examiner develops a point. But if you try to idealize the length, you are going on the wrong track, which might be the track of the failure. I hope you got your answer, Edmund. Okay. Uh, okay, fine. So I hope. There is another question from Isha. She's asking, Sir, if any question have balance sheet and a lot of numerical information, then I am not able to tackle it. Like how much to write and how much to calculate. See, Isha, if a question has a balance sheet, and if a question has an income statement, that is particularly an audit risk or a ROM question, right? Question number one, which in every time in a question number one, the exhibit number 3 will contain the extracts of the financial statement or the full financial statement, right? Exhibit number 3. Now, if the examiner asks you use the analytical procedure, then you know the mechanism, right? When the examiner asks you use the analytical procedure, then you have 5 marks for it, and you calculate the 5 ratios from the information, and you comment on the 5 ratios, finding the relevant risk to get your 5 marks. But if the question is not asking you to use the analytical procedure and you have a big balance sheet and a big income statement, you normally see that in a balance sheet or income statement, the examiner puts the note number 1, 2, 3, 4. You must have seen that, right? And the examiner then explains the note number. Now, I every time tell students that in a balance sheet, if there is a note number, or in the income statement, there is a note number, then that note number is a risk. Because when the examiner is linking the note number, that means the examiner is drawing your attention towards a risk. So every note number should be carefully read, because there will be an underlying risk in every note number. So that's how you can utilize the balance sheet and income statement if you don't want to get involved in calculations. But if the question asks you use the analytical procedures, then you have to get involved in calculation. But even if the question is not asking and you are a clever student, you can make use of the numbers. Like you can find a relevant trend. For example, you're commenting on the revenue recognition policy and you believe the revenue recognition policy is wrong and the revenue could be overstated. Now, if you're a clever student, you can find how much revenue has increased over the last year, and you find a percentage. And you say the revenue could be overstated, full stop. And you say the revenue has already increased by 15% over the last year. That means the risk of overstatement exists. Now, that's how you can use the numbers for your betterment, right? Okay, there is another question in terms of my discussion with Isha. Asking for June's exam asked about difference between performance audit and the audit of performance information and the procedures used in auditing the performance information. What are other areas can be asked for? See, Wilfred, there are three questions on performance information. One is in December 14. That's the question number 3B. Then you have a December 15, question number 2B. And then you have the June 17. Procedures is must. Every time there was a question on performance information, 50 to 60% of the marks were on procedures. So that's one. Then the knowledge. And that's every time I tell students read the article on performance information, because every time 40% of the marks on performance information was from the examiner article. Okay. Then there is another question coming from Zamad Khurram. He's asking, sir, usually got mixed while writing risk and impact in the ROM. Can you please elaborate? See, Zamad, when you're working on accounting treatments, right, which is a very pivotal part of an audit risk question or a very pivotal part of a ROM question. Uh, in an accounting treatment, suppose an accounting treatment relates with a disclosure, like related party, like a non-adjusting event. And what is the risk? The risk is no disclosure, or the risk is lack of disclosure, or the risk is incomplete disclosure. And what is the impact? The financial statements could be materially misstated, because if the disclosure is incomplete or if there is no disclosure. Now you're working on a share-based payment. Now, what is the risk in share-based payment? Recognition of an expense, or recognition of a liability, or recognition of an equity. So there is a risk of recognition. And what can be the impact? The expense could be understated, the liability could be understated. Or if you're working on revenue recognition, then what is the risk? The risk is the recognition, the risk is the cutoff, the risk is the early recognition of the revenue, and the impact is the revenue could be overstated. So see, when you look at the accounting standards, Zamat, in an accounting standard, there can be a risk of disclosure, there can be a risk of presentation, there can be a risk of classification, there can be a risk of valuation like IS2. But for that particular risk, what is the impact on the financial statement? What is under and overstated? I hope that clarifies you, Zamat, right? Okay, I might be missing a lot of questions, which I will be answering after the Facebook session ends down. Because again, there is a flow of questions. Whenever I'm answering one question, there is number of questions which scroll down, right? So there is another big question coming from Amira. She's asking, sir, I have a problem of hard to find the word to explain so many answers, usually not that lengthy. I did refer to the marking scheme and my points aligned with it. Wonderful. However, sometime I look at the answer and their answer is too lengthy. I understand that my answer will never be the same. Exactly. Very good. Uh, as examiner answer, but is it okay if my answer is not as lengthy as examiner answer, because I'm feeling insecure? Amira, see, I've answered this question so many times on my social media, on my webinars I do for ACCA Pakistan, and even in the session today. See, idealizing the examiner answer, replicating the examiner answer is not a success, right? You need to reconcile your point. See, if I am explaining a revenue recognition point, or if you are explaining a revenue recognition point, or if the examiner is explaining a revenue recognition point, at least what we have in similarity among three of us is revenue recognition. Now, I explain revenue recognition in like 4 sentences. You explain it in 5 sentences, and examiner explains that in 8 sentences. The point is the reconciliation of the point. So don't get yourself insecure. If you're developing your point in a reasonable length, then that's wonderful, right? There is another question from Bismi. She's asking, sir, how to tackle questions on audit evidence? Uh, Question like comment on audit evidence. Only 2 questions of that is available. Yes, this has come too less, right? When the examiner asks you comment on the sufficiency and appropriateness of the evidence. Now, it's very simple. When you're reading a case, the audit team has gathered evidence, right? And when the audit team has gathered evidence, there might be some flaws in the evidence. They might not have gathered adequate evidence, and they might not have gathered sufficient evidence. Might be their sample size is wrong. Might be they have not verified the right assertion. For example, they were verifying the fixed assets, and the scenario tells you that while they were verifying the fixed assets, they didn't verify the existence of the fixed asset. Now you say, oh, this is the first comment on the sufficiency and appropriateness of the evidence, that the evidence gathered is inadequate because they didn't gather any evidence on the existence of the fixed asset. Comment on the evidence, comment on the sufficiency and appropriateness of the evidence means critically evaluate what was the mistake in the evidence gathering, what was the mistake done by the team in gathering evidence, just like a critical appraisal of the report, right, where you find a weakness. Just like the same case in comment on the evidence, you need to find the weakness in the evidence, right? Okay, there is another question from Azan. She's asking, hi sir, I have said this paper around 6 times. How do I go about passing in the month it in the month of June? See, Azan, you have a time. You need to sit down seriously, find your weak areas. If you are able to find your weak areas and you jot them down on the paper that, okay, this is my weak area, this is my weak area, this is my weak area, then you have to develop an approach on that weak area. And probably you need to do a self appraisal of your answers with the examiner marking scheme and the examiner report. And I would prefer that you connect with me after the March exams and you send me some of your assignments which I can read through and I can mark through. Because that's the only way you can overcome your issues. Because if you've set for 6 time, the only thing which can help you pass now in June is the right practice, and that is also marked by the tutor. Okay, there is another question from Sijab. Okay, he's asking, so when doing analytical procedures, which ratios are most ideal and how can I choose ratios? See, examiner has mentioned so many times in the marking scheme and in the examiner reports that look at the examiner answers for which ratios are ideal. Normally, if you have the data available, calculate the gross profit margin. If you have the data available, calculate the interest cover. If you have the data available, calculate the effective tax rate. So that's from P&L, right? And from the balance sheet, if you have the data available, calculate the current ratio. If you have the data available, calculate the gearing ratio. And if you have the data available, inventory holding period, because I think normally you don't have data for the inventory holding periods and the receivable collection period. So they sound like more ideal um, ratios, which are used most of the time in examiner answers, right? Okay. There is another question from Kiran Kumar asking, sir, for the analytical procedure, the related comment regarding the specific ratio seems to be speculative risk. Is that fine? Yes. See, you found a ratio. Now, a ratio has a numerator and a ratio has a denominator, right? Now, there can be a risk in the numerator. If a numerator is an income or a numerator is an asset, then there is a risk it might be overstated. If the numerator or the denominator is a liability or is an expense, it might be understated. And you can connect that with a case study. A lot of time when you work on interest cover, in the interest cover, it might be that the interest cover is falling or rising, sorry. And when you see an interest cover rising and you go and see the finance cost was static, despite the fact the company took a new loan. So you can connect that with a case study that despite the fact the company took a new loan, the finance cost is static. That means the finance cost is understated. So at times when you're commenting on the ratio, because you must have read the case first, and then you start to comment on the ratios. So you might connect some of the understatements and overstatements with what you read in the case study. Okay, there is another question from Muhammad Zain asking, sir, in the risk answer, the examiner tells both possibilities, like revenue can be under or overstated. So is it okay we write both? No. See, again, the examiner answers are tutorial guidance, and that's what I have been discussing so much over the last few years, that you only look at one side. You don't read examiner reports, you just read examiner answers. When you read examiner report, examiner says the student has to be very specific with under or overstatement. Yes, sometime it is very difficult to pick the exact part under or over, and you then say under and over both. And when it is very, very particular, then you cannot say both. So you have to be particular. You have to be particular because examiner criticized that heavily, right, Muhammad Zain, in the examiner report. Okay. There is another question from Wakas Faiz. What is expected? Either comment on the matters or on sufficiency of the appropriateness of the evidence. Again, Wakas, I'm not the examiner, but yes, both are ideal. you should practice both. You should know how to comment on the matters, and you should know how to comment on the sufficiency and appropriateness of the evidence. It's very difficult to pick which one is highly probable, right? Okay, there is another question from Sirhan asking, sir, if 60 to 70% points match with marking scheme, is that sufficient? Wonderful, wonderful, best. Okay, there is another question from Aisha Hassan Ali. Sir, kindly clear that if a company is listed, so in a qualified and an adverse opinion, CAM will not become part of the audit report. No, 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 no. Aisha, if you issue a qualified opinion on a certain matter in a listed company, right? For example, the inventory valuation was wrong. And because of the wrong inventory valuation, you issued a qualified opinion to a listed company. Now, that is one matter which leads to a qualified opinion, right? CAM is still part of a listed company report. When you do audits, you have key audit matters, which you must have identified at the planning stage or during the course of the audits. You must have worked on those key audit matters. So you need to exactly tell the shareholders that these were the key audit matters and what we did on the key audit matters. So in a qualified report, CAM still come. But when you give an adverse opinion, the ISA 701 says it is the judgment of the auditor whether to give CAM or not. Because when you say adverse opinion, then you're saying the financial statement as a whole do not give a true and fair view. So you need to think about whether you will give CAM or not. It is a subjective area. But in case of a disclaimer of opinion, the ISA 701 is very clear that CAM will not come. So I hope that's clear. Okay, there is another question from Isha. So should we read a whole question in one go, or should we write answer in the middle for all the three questions? No, read the question as a whole first, because it's very important. There might be some paragraphs which you didn't read, and they must have impacted your answer. So every time, first read the requirements. After reading the requirements, read the whole case, whether it is section A or section B, and then start writing your answer. Never start writing your answer with an incomplete reading of the case study. Okay, there is another question from Edmund asking, sir, why is that when the current ratio is falling, you indicate that it is okay and no risk? See, every time when when the auditor practically performs analytical procedure, not every analytical procedure indicates risk. You have to understand that. See, you cannot forcefully identify risk from every analytical procedure. Whenever the current ratio is rising, there is a fair chance that the assets might be overstated and the liabilities might be understated. But if the current ratio is like falling, is like deteriorating, yes, there might be a risk that the company is facing some liquidity problems. The company might be facing some material uncertainties relating to going concern, and the management might not give a proper disclosure of that. So when you go to the audit with a current ratio falling, the risk can be on a material uncertainty of a going concern, but you have to justify that. So normally, if you believe you found a ratio, but there is no movement in the ratio, this time there is a very slight movement in the ratio. So we can tell examiner currently there is no risk, but we need to investigate it further. But when there is a very significant rise in a ratio or a very significant fall in the ratio, then in that case, finding a risk is more appropriate. Okay, there is another question from Shapan Das asking, sir, tell about practice management. Exactly, Shapan, what do you want to know about practice management? If you can post another question, so I'll be answering that in the session today. Okay, there is another question from Anita. Sir, can we write trending risk like goodwill is same from the last year and the finance cost, etc.? If yes, how much marks will get? Yes, exactly 2 marks. If you pick up that the finance cost is still the same, despite the fact there is an increase in the borrowing, so the finance cost is understated, that's worth 2 marks, right? Or if the same, even though the goodwill is for impairment, you need to find an in study. If you find an indicator of impairment from the case study, and goodwill has a value, so you can find the materiality of the goodwill, and you can comment on the treatment of the goodwill, and you can then say because the goodwill is static, so it's overstated. Same goes with the finance cost. You can find the materiality of the finance cost, and you can tell that despite there is a borrowing rise, the finance cost is still static. So it means it's understated. Okay, there is another question from because you're giving June attempt, right? So is it better that you connect with me on WhatsApp after the session ends today? Because I'm a bit busy with March students, so I'll be giving you a better time after your after the March exams gets over. Okay, there is another question from Anita. She's asking, sir, can we do analytical review in question number one, even if not asked? No, 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 no. Don't do it. If it's not asked, then don't do it. Yes, you can use the numbers. You can still use the numbers to link your risk. You can still use the numbers to find a problem, but you will not do that proper analytical review like 5 ratios and commenting on the 5 ratios. Not at all. Okay. There is another question from Haji Ismail. Sir, I think there are brighter chances of sufficient and appropriate audit evidence rather comment on matters. What do you think? Oh, okay. I might agree with you because again, sufficient and appropriate audit evidence last came in March 2020 exams, right? And after the March 2020 exams, there were cancellations of exam because of COVID. Exams were highly affected in some markets. So yes, the chances for comment on sufficiency and appropriateness of the evidence cannot be ruled out. But still, it's a difficult say, right? So let's practice both of them, right, Haji, and get to the exam hall. Okay. There is another question from MD Shirajum. What will be the adverse opinion in review engagement, right? See, when you do the review engagement is a moderate assurance, right? So in a moderate assurance, your opinion is your statement is negative assurance. Okay, so there is another question from Anita. Okay, that's just a comment on okay. There is another question from Edmund. So how you explain the profitability? How you explain the profitability ratio? Which factors would you explain in it? See, when you're commenting on the return on capital employed, it's not necessarily that from a return on capital employed you find a risk. If the return on capital employed has increased a lot, then that means the profit could be overstated. And you can find the possible reasons why you think the profit could be overstated. There might be something in the case like directors' bonuses are linked to profit, and for that reason the profit has increased a lot over the last year, and that might be one reason that you might find a risk from the return on capital employed. Okay, there is another question from Vakas, sir, how to respond email or letter in a proper way? Letter is not required, right, in a AAA paper. AAA paper is a briefing note, right? Every time in a AAA paper, Vakas, I think you're giving the first attempt because every time in the AAA paper, it's not an SBL paper where format keeps changing. You have a briefing note in the AAA. When you read the partner email in the exhibit number 1, the partner says, prepare a briefing note for my use. So you need to write a briefing note. And I've already explained how you write a briefing note on my YouTube channel. I've done a video on the 4 professional marks. So if you go to my YouTube channel and you scroll down, you will find a video on the 4 professional marks, right? Okay. There is another question from Billene, if I'm pronouncing that right. So please clear that the purpose of other meta para is the auditor report not clear. Is it added when the auditor changes? What does that mean? Yes, when there is a change of auditor. See, last time the auditor was done by another auditor. This time the audit is done by another auditor. Suppose you're reading a reporting question, right? And the reporting question tells you that the auditor was changed recently. Now that means a change of auditor, right? So if there is a change of auditor, then in the other meta paragraph, you do mention that the last year audit was done by another auditor and who issued a fill in the blank opinion on such and such date, because the other meta paragraph really helps you with the segregation of duty and with the auditor liability. If there is any case on the auditor, then you know the last year audit was done by someone else. This year audit is done by someone else. So if there is any problem relating to the last year audit, then the liability falls on the previous auditor. So that's the reason you add the other meta paragraph. But since very long, I think last time the other meta paragraph came in the AAA exams was way back in 2011. Since then, we've never seen other meta paragraphs coming in. Okay. There is another question from Eggy asking, I was unable to use copy paste on the exam. Is that happened to more students? I think there were some problems, technical problems, which do came in the last computer-based exam with copy paste. And this has been a frequently asked question which students keep asking to ACCA. And ACCA believes that this problem has been resolved for this time. So probably be optimistic on that. Okay. There is another question from Isha. Any final tips? Isha, I've released my final tips and I hope you keep working on them. And the session was just exactly a revision of students' frequently asked question. And I hope this session must have benefited all of you. And I tried my best answering most of your queries today. And so which can help me go with my preparation. I think in the last 6 days, Isha, just focus on fine tuning the last 6 attempts, reading examiner reports, just revising the marking schemes, nothing else. If you believe you have read the articles, you believe you have done what the tutor has said, you believe you have gone over the tips of the tutor, you've watched the March 21 webinar. I hope you all have watched the March 21 webinar, which I did for ACC Pakistan, because that all is very important in the last 6 days, right? So I think just sit back, relax, fine tune yourself. If you think you've studied well, then even over studying will add to your stress level. So you need to relax your mind, right? So if you relax your mind, absorb your mind, cool down your mind, the mind will perform better on the day of exam. But if this mind is occupied, is burdened, it might not function as good as it should function on the day of exam. Okay. Edmund, again, explain the risk for different frameworks by subsidiaries, different year ends of the subsidiary, and using local auditors by the subsidiary in the audit. See, different auditors means a detection risk for the principal auditor, for the group auditor. If there is a significant subsidiary with a different auditor, then in that case, it's a detection risk for the group auditor, because he might not have an sync or alignment with the component auditor, right? Different frameworks, there is a risk of consolidation errors, because when you consolidate the group financial statements, you might be converting the different frameworks to the group frameworks, and the conversion, there is a risk of conversions from the local standards to the international standards, and that might increase the under and overstatement of the consolidated results. Okay, Namisha is asking, sir, if in the question material uncertainties relating to going concern are properly disclosed and everything else is perfect, then still we need MURGC paragraph, or do we need an unmodified opinion? See, when there is a material uncertainty which is adequately disclosed, that is when you add an MURGC paragraph. And in the MURGC paragraph, you tell the shareholder that there is a material uncertainty which has been adequately disclosed by the management. So MURGC paragraph will come in the condition you are saying, Namisha. But will there be any impact on the opinion? No, there will be no impact on the opinion. If the management must not have disclosed the material uncertainty, then that would have resulted either into a qualified opinion or an adverse opinion. Okay, the next question is from Wakas. Sir, for audit risk question, we have to consider whole question 1. Yes, exactly. You read through the whole question number 1, the exhibit 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because the audit risk can be scattered in several exhibits, right? Okay. There is another question from Oways. Is tender document still part of AAA? Yes, proposal document, tender document. I think the last time the question came on that was way back in December 14. Since December 14, we have not seen a question on tender document, but it is still part and parcel of the AAA paper. Okay, there are a long question coming from Pingos. A lot of comment on quality of planning and performance of the audit issues. Issues on quality control and professional issues include parts of audit managers making bad comments or not instructing more procedures. Can we gain marks by raising issues of professional competence and knowledge of our audit manager? Exactly. Very good. And the answer to your question is yes, you can. Okay. No, Isha, when you add an MURGC paragraph, it results in a modified report. See, modified opinion is a different terminology and modified report is a different terminology. I am 100% crystal clear that MURGC results in a modified report. So you need to read my comment again, right? So you are confusing two things. Modified opinion is a qualified opinion, is an adverse opinion, is a disclaimer of opinion. And there are a modified opinion leads to a modified report. An MURGC, if you add an MURGC paragraph, it will lead to a modified report, because MURGC paragraph is not part of the standard report. So modified report is one thing, modified opinion is the second thing. I hope you're clear on that. I think 6 days before the exams, uh, something like this can happen. And that's easily happening with you, Isha. Okay. Yes, exactly, Edmund. On my Facebook page. The session is going live, so it will be available on my Facebook Live. You can replay that as many times as possible, right? Okay, there is another question coming from Shapan sir. Acceptance decision for old and new is important for this setting. See, I've been very critical of this in my tips. I believe a lot of you must not have seen my tips so far. You don't follow my AAA Facebook page. Please do follow it, because in the recent few exam settings since September 18, examiner focus on practice management has increased a lot, asking you comment on the matters in accepting a new client or in accepting more services from an existing client. So the acceptance decision is a very valid question and can be very important for March 2021 exams. I've already highlighted that in my tips I released on my YouTube channel and on my Facebook channel. So please do follow that. Namisha, exactly. Your both modified opinions and the MURGC leads to a modified report, right? A report can be modified for several reasons. So a report can be modified due to a change of opinion, and a report can be modified when you insert a paragraph. Which paragraph? MURGC paragraph. Which paragraph? Emphasis of a matter paragraph. Which paragraph? Other matter paragraph. These three paragraphs makes your report modified. I've been very clear on that. I wrote a long post on my Facebook page, and I was absolutely clear in that. So again, reading the question and reading the post of the tutor, both at times gets on the wrong track. As in the exam paper, you don't read the question well. The same happens with the post of the tutor as well. Okay. Chantal sir, answered and resolved. I tried my best to click as many questions as possible, but still, if any of your question has been unaddressed, I'll be looking forward to my Facebook page and I'll be replying to your individual comments if that was not asked for in the individual session. Just 5 more minutes, and I'm just scrolling over some of the recent questions. Namisha again, so while writing answers, do we need to use particular jargons or professional language? Yes. See, you are a manager. Try to realize that, and that's where I think your vocabulary up. When you read examiner answers, your vocabulary build up, and that's where I encourage students to read articles. Build up your vocabulary. You are a manager. Okay, important question from Hosai. So no current issues for March? Yes, no current issues for March. No new article has been published as of today, the 22nd of February. So no current issues. Again, current issues don't come in every exam setting of AAA. So that's nothing unusual, right? Uh, Shazeb, sir, what we should do one day before exams? Should we revise the whole syllabus or do some questions? One day before exams, relax, chill. Don't do anything. Watch the Pakistan Super League or watch any program which makes you relax. Cool down. I think 24 hours. You need to have a mediation of your mind. Relax your mind, cool your mind, because it will work better on the day of exam. I believe there are so many students who keep doing studies minutes before entering the exam hall. If you have done a lot, Shazib, honestly, seriously, that was just a joke apart. Do nothing. But yes, if you think you need to fine tune, I think you just should read some examiner answers or examiner reports a day before exam. Okay. Oko, a member of the audit team who had provided additional review and accounting services to the client without knowledge of the audit manager and received direct payment from the client. Ethical issues, self-review, threat management threat, and also is there any other issues? Maybe lack of integrity of the member of the audit team. Yes, exactly. He didn't disclose that. It means that the monitoring in the firm was weak. That a member of the team provided services to the client and no one was aware of it. So I think the monitoring in the audit firm is also to be criticized here, Oko. Okay, Isha, again, been very skeptical throughout the session today. Isha, thank you for that participation. So can you explain what does it mean that we cannot write both paras and opinions together? See, one issue can either result in a modification of the opinion or in a paragraph. If a material uncertainty relating to going concern is adequately disclosed, what will you do? You will simply add a MURGC paragraph. That is it. Or if there is a significant disclosure adequately made in the notes to the financial statement, you will simply add that to an emphasis of a meta paragraph. Or if there is a change of auditor, you will simply add the change of the auditor to an other meta paragraph. Or if there is a wrong inventory valuation, which is material to the financial statement, you will issue a qualified opinion. So every issue results in one area of the audit report. See, otherwise the shareholder will get confused. On the issue, you issue a qualified opinion, and on the same issue, you added a CAM, and on the same issue, you added an emphasis of a meta paragraph. What will happen to the shareholder? So the audit report has to be clear. The audit report has to be exactly to the point where it should be. So if there is one issue, either the issue will hit a paragraph or the issue will hit an opinion. I hope you're clear on that, Isha. Okay. The question keeps coming in, and I'm just running out of time for my session, right? Just last 5 minutes. I'll be ending it at exactly 7:30 Pakistan Standard Time. Sir, is it fine to judge? This is a question from Dumo. Sir, is it fine to judge the materiality based only on the profit before tax, not on the total asset? If in the question number 1, if it relates to expenses, exactly fine, Dumo. No issues with that. Okay, there's a comment from Ahmed Riyaz. Sir, you are a legend, passed AAA due to you on the first attempt. Jazakallah for your services. Thank you so much, Ahmed Raza. And still, even if you've passed and you're still watching the session, that's tremendous. Great. Thank you. Okay. There is another question from Hosai. Sir, I didn't work on a complete past paper, but following your webinars from March 2019, I follow questions you've worked in webinars. Is that sufficient? Yes, it is, but still I prefer that you go over the last 6 papers. One day, one paper, and still that is fine. Okay. Again, which question starts first? Again, I've answered this question. You can start in any order. You can start with section B first, or you can start with section A first. A question from Ajay. So somewhere I've read that MURGC, EOM, or OM are part of the unmodified opinion with additional communications. Please clarify. No, something which is not part of the standard report, Ajay, if you add that, it will automatically modify the report. The literal meaning of the word modify is to change from the standard. So when you add the MURGC, EOM, and OM, they are a change to the standard report. So the moment you bring a change to the standard report, it becomes a modified report. A lot of time the student think modified means negative. No, modified doesn't mean negative. Modified means to change. The change can be positive, the change can be negative, right? Okay, so that's perfectly fine. Okay, I wish you all a very best of luck. I'm just winding up. If you have any other further comments, I'll be answering them through the chat on my Facebook later after the session ends. But I'm really happy that you joined the session and you attended it live. But I think you got answers to your question as much as possible within the constraint of time. And I hope this session was beneficial to all of you, because I didn't focus on the tips and techniques, which was what's published on my Facebook page. The purpose of this session was Ask the Tutor. And I kept rolling as many questions as possible in the last 60 minutes, just for the benefit of all of you, right? So I wish you all success in your upcoming exams. 7 days to go, critical times, anxiety, stress, demotivations, um, feeling like you are forgetting everything, feeling like you're mixing everything. I think that's quite a natural exam stress, and that's good. So if you believe, oh, I'm mixing the modified opinion with the unmodified opinion, or I'm mixing the modified report with an unmodified report, or I'm mixing my knowledge, that's quite fine. It's here, but it's just mixing up because the stress level is rising. So if you cool down, relax, uh, and that would be wonderful for you, right? So I hope there is tremendous resources which you must have availed in the last few months. You must have self-study, or you must have watched my webinars, or you must have taken a course from me, or you must have taken a crash course from me, or you must have followed my Facebook page or my YouTube page. Whichever way you have studied for AAA, I wish you all a very best of luck, from whichever country you are from, because I believe there is a global student base here. And whichever country you are from, I wish you success in your upcoming exams in March 2021. Just be positive, just be optimistic, just focus on the case study in 3 hours. 3 hours in the exam is crucial. Whoever takes the right judgment in the 3 hours, whoever keep the mind cool in 3 hours, whoever focus on the case study in 3 hours, whoever find the points from the case study, is the best student. If you start getting to rote learning stuff, if you start bringing the bookish knowledge, if you start writing your own answers, not looking at the case study, you are a bad student. So if you want to be good, 3 hours and 15 minutes. Whoever keeps the mind cool, exercise judgment, be relaxed, take careful judgments in constraint of 3 hours and 15 minutes, you will surpass 50. Otherwise it's difficult. So be optimistic, right? Be optimistic with the upcoming March 2021 exams. And again, once again, thank you very much. Once again, if you had questions which I didn't answer, because I tried my best to take scattered questions, because some students did posted a lot of questions, so I need to answer them again and again. But thank you very much. I think Ajay, Hosai, Owais, Oko, Azan, Ahmed Riaz, Isha, thank you very much for being part of the session. Shazeb, thank you very much for part of the sessions. Shapan, Edmund, numerous questions came from Edmund. Wakas, Fez, numerous questions. Namisha, uh, Aggie, Anita, a lot of Haji Ismail, a lot of question came from you as well. Thank you very much for that participation. Muhammad Zain, Sirhan, you raised a lot of questions as well. Thank you very much for that. Bismi as well, Amira as well, Zamat Khurram as well. Thank you very much for all that. So I hope you had a productive session. And you learned something out of the session, right? I might be doing a session on audit report tomorrow, and I'll post the timings, because I believe students make mess of audit report. Even though I've put a comment on that on my Facebook page, students try to mix things up in audit report. I don't understand why. You mix qualified, unqualified adverse, you mix CAM, EOM, OM, EOM, you mix them together. As if you put things in the blender and you put the button of the blender on and everything gets stirred away. No, everything is unique in an audit report. Everything is unique in an audit report. You cannot just bring them together, put them in a blender and mix them up. No, this is what the student do. So I need to do a session on an audit report, because seriously, a lot of students mix things up in an audit report. Even though you have an article of the examiner, exam technique article part 5 on audit report, where examiner criticize you. I hope you've read the article, exam technique article part 5, right? So I'll be doing a session on that as well tomorrow. Hopefully, I'm not committing, but I will be doing it tomorrow on the 23rd or 24th max. So that will be an exclusive reporting. Ask the tutor on a reporting area. Today's session was just ask the tutor anything you want to ask from the AAA perspective, and that was the variety of questions we got today. So we might have a focused topic-wise ask the tutor coming from tomorrow, and that's where you can take more interest into. So thank you very much. I'm Kashif Kamran, and I'm signing off from this Ask the Tutor Facebook Live session, the very first one for March 2021 exams. And I'll be back with another one for sure, probably on audit report, because I think that's an area which needs a fine tuning before you start making mess on the 1st of March. Best of luck, be optimistic, be confident, and you will have success definitely. Thank you. I'm Kashif Kamran, signing off from my Facebook Live session. Take care, goodbye, and Allah Hafiz, all of you.